All right, thank you, Kickstarter contributors. So my name's Chris. We're in my studio here. This is A Rogue Story Productions, um, and I'm mixing all these tracks for Emily and Marina. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through kind of my first pass at the initial mix of this song. This song happens to be True Colors. They're covering the Cyndi Lauper version. There's also a Phil Collins version that I knew before I knew the Cyndi Lauper version. Um, so my goal here isn't to teach you how to mix. It's just to kind of show you what's going on behind the scenes, talk a little bit about my philosophy as a mix engineer, and you know, just kind of the general vibe of the session. These tracks were recorded by Emily and Marina, not in my studio here. They were recorded elsewhere, but they sent me the tracks, so I mix them now. So without further ado, let's get into it. Um, so we're working in Logic Pro X, which this is Apple's DAW, which DAW, Digital Audio Workstation. It's basically recording software is all it means. If you're getting into this, use whichever DAW you want. They all work great. In 2020, they're all just awesome. So pick the one that has the workflow that you like and just use it. And if anyone questions that, just forget it. It's not worth your time. They're all great. So down here in my mixer view, you can see I've set up a few things already. This is just some kind of boring stuff that I didn't want to bother you with. Basically, all the tracks arrive normalized, meaning all the highest peak in any one waveform is at 0 dBFS, decibels full scale. That means it is going to peak somewhere. And a good idea for gain staging, I'm going to pull up one of these plugins. You can see right here, I have this set to negative 18 dB. That's also dBFS, decibels full scale. You want some headroom on your tracks. You don't want to be working with the meters just pegged the whole time. It'll always sound like garbage. So always do that. I also have some things going here just to kind of sweeten up each track a little bit. Admittedly, kind of boring stuff, but it looks sexy when it's going. So we have a tape plugin from the company Softtube. We'll be talking more about them. I love their company. These tape sims, really what they're doing is adding some saturation or very, very low level distortion. They're adding a little bit of dynamic control, sort of a compression, but it's very, very subtle. And then next we have this plugin called True Iron from a company called Kazrog. This sort of simulates the sound of running through the transformer on an analog mix console. It's actually limiting frequency response a little bit, and adding a tiny bit more saturation, but it does it in such a pleasant way that I really like putting it on tracks before we get into it. Just makes everything kind of sweet. So here where you see output 1 and 2, this is my 2 bus or my stereo mix bus. Top of the channel, I have Boz Digital Labs Mongoose. This is basically taking everything in the mix from 400 hertz down and folding it to mono, which is important. So you have mono compatibility and everything sounds nice and tight in the bottom end. You don't need to do this. I just like to do it. And then an extra step, because this is such a sparse mix, I've taken the high, which is everything above the crossover frequency, so everything above 400 hertz. I've applied a little bit of widening. This is a specific kind of, without getting too engineering-y, this is a specific kind of comb filtering that creates what's called a Haas effect and artificially widens something. Anyway, in this case, it's just going to give the mix a little more room to breathe. Another instance of this same Kazrog True Iron plugin. Once again, another Softtube plug. This is the Drummer S73. It's basically a multi-band compressor, just for a little bit of bus compression, just to kind of glue everything together at the end. I have other plugs that I could use for that, but I like this one a lot because it does a really good job of kind of spreading things out and adding clarity, hence this clarity option on here. Then lastly, another instance of tape, this one running to a clean master mixdown. So with that in mind, let's set up a loop and get to it. So I've got everything down to 0. This is my first time hearing this, so let's see what happens. So first off, I'm just going to bring everything up a bit, get an idea of what's happening.
You with the sad eyes discouraged. Oh, I realize it.
For me, when I'm mixing, I always like to decide what's going to be the focal point of a track. And in this case, I can see, let's rearrange these a little bit. Emily's vocal is here, and then Marina's vocal is here. Because Marina's is more sparsed out, or spaced out, I should say, this tells me that Emily's is the lead. So that is going to be the focus. So we want to mix everything relative to that focal point if we want to have kind of some cohesion in the mix.
Hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness inside you make you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid.
This head nod here, this is very important. If you're not doing this when you're mixing, you are doing it wrong. If you're not into what you're mixing, it's going to translate. I know I said I'm not going to teach you how to mix, but this is critical. Even if you don't like the track and someone just paid you to mix it, do your best, get into it, have fun with it. You know, if you're not doing this, you're just all wrong. It's good. It will translate. Trust me. I've done a lot of sessions where I'm sitting there mixing like this. Like, I listen back to them. They sound like crap. So, you know, nod your head, get into it, have fun. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to strap on this plugin. This is my favorite plugin in the world. It goes on every channel. This is Softtube's Console 1. When I edit the video, I'll make a little graphical bang right here, and it'll be a picture of the hardware controller. So this is not just a plugin, this is also a physical hardware controller. There's one right here in front of me. I don't want to move the camera to show you. But so what this does, bam, look at that. So now spread across this mix, right now it's sort of as if I'm mixing into an SSL 4000E analog mix console. Kind of. You know, it's like I'm not going to get too far into it, but for this kind of stuff, I actually don't want this SSL 4000E console. I want this Console 1 American Class A console, which is a redundant name. This is their take on an API console. It's a little bit cleaner sounding than that SSL that loaded by default. However, because we're in the digital world, I don't need to just stick with whatever the console has. I'm going to switch back in the EQ from that first console we had. So the front end, the shaper, and then on the back end, the compressor and the output are from an API console, and in the middle, that EQ is from an SSL. That's a setup I've used on a lot of stuff, and I really like it for these things where I don't want to be, this isn't like some slamming rock and roll track, so let's not treat it like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I took the work of building that right there, so I'm just going to copy that to these other tracks. Boom, now everything is SSL. So let's bring that back down. First thing we're going to work on is the bass. Let's get this sounding how we want it. No bleed from anything else. We don't need to worry about that. First thing I'm going to do,
don't be discouraged. Oh,
bring this drive up. When this drive is set to 5, it's sort of neutral on the console. Back here it's subtractive gain. Here is neutral gain. If I start going like this, it starts getting distorted and buzzy. But
hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can.
This character knob I'm playing with here, this is filtering out how much of the signal gets sent to the saturation of the console. So I brought this down. I just want for this bass, I just want the bottom end to have some saturation to warm it up, and then I want the top to be totally clean.
Lose sight of it all, in the darkness inside you make you feel so small.
Dial in some
but
compression.
I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you.
So what I just did there, as you can see, this ratio control here that I'm moving. So that's just setting the compression ratio. Again, I promise not to get too engineering-y. So suffice it to say, that's the intensity of the compression. The attack is how quickly the compressor slaps down on something. I want it to be a little bit slow so that it lets the initial transient through and then clamps down and adds some sustain and body. But I don't want it, so that's this attack here. So I had it kind of up here on 18 milliseconds. And then I want it to release fairly quickly because I don't want it to get like, I don't know. I don't want it to sound like it's trying to be a synth bass. I want it to sound like an upright bass. So I've set this attack or the release down here like 1 second. Actually, maybe like half seconds, speed it up just a little bit more. And then the threshold here, you can see that line moving down. That's how much signal has to come through the compressor before it engages. So I'm adjusting this until I'm seeing about 3 dBs of gain reduction, which you'll see that jumping meter up at the top.
True colors
Just kissing it now. A little more.
like a rainbow.
There we go.
Show me a smile and don't be unhappy.
Yep, liking that. So the next thing we want to do is, you can hear this bass on its own. There's some good attack in the upper mid range, but it's not totally being captured. So we're going to jump into the EQ section here. Out of my ears, that's around 1.4 kilohertz. I'm going to tighten up the Q, which is the width of the band. So we're going to bring this up. Yep, you can already hear the attack on her right hand hitting a little harder now. Yeah, that sounds nice. Don't want to get too carried away with it. But I'm liking that. Question's always in the mix. Is that attack going to interfere with the vocal? Because if it does, you don't want it. Remember, we said the vocal was the star.
If this world that makes you crazy and you've taken all you can bear, you can call me up.
We're liking this.
Because you
So
know
there's one more thing we're going to do to the
I
bass.
see you're
We're
true.
going to solo it. And then I'm holding these 2 buttons, and what we want to compare is the bass louder after we processed it, or is it a unity gain? Because I don't want to add a bunch of processing and then think it's better just because it's louder. There it is without. So it's noticeably louder with the processing. So here we turn down to the lower right there. It says volume -3 dB. I just peeled 3 decibels off it. Get closer. Still needs to take one. Half dB more. Yep, there it is. Yep, that sounded really nice.
Hard to take courage